If you want to be more effective in your work and in your life, and you'd like to have more confidence that you're meeting your intentions, this is where it begins. Welcome to Do Busy Right, helping you organize your information and manage your attention so that they work for you, not against you. We educate you and encourage you by discussing ways to be more effective, not more exhausted. Let's do busy right. Hi there. Today we're going to talk about paper. Is our use of paper just a habit we need to get rid of, or is it something more? Is it still a useful tool in 2024, or should we be trying to break some sort of addiction to it? This episode is inspired by a LinkedIn post by Chris Mullen. In his post, he talks about the great things about paper. He waxes, dare I say, poetic on how great paper is and the great things it does for us. And he focuses on paper's limited ability to distract us. And I think that's absolutely on point. I think that any tool that allows us to get our thoughts out of our heads is good. Now, I'm going to take Chris's post and kind of amplify it a little bit, because I don't think that paper is, it is what Chris says it is, but I don't think it's any sort of a panacea. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And from a Do Busy Right perspective, where does paper land in our workflow and in our work usage? I said anything that helps us get thoughts out of our heads. I think we should have a habit of spending some time thinking. I've heard great things from people who have successfully and effectively journaled in their lives over a period of time. So I do think paper helps us think. And by thinking, I don't mean feed up daydreaming. There's a place for that. I mean thinking, wrestling with what's going on inside of our skulls. And there is some magic in realizing that. In fact, I would say that's the best way to think about something, is to realize it. And when I say realize, I of course mean make it real in the world, not think more about it. When we do that, some structure comes into play, and I'll talk about this at great length. And that's realizing our thought. I think lots of different media can work as a realization mechanism. And an example of that is, I've always thought that I think well when I'm talking, when I'm trying to explain my thought to somebody else and they're asking questions and they're forcing me to be clearer about what it is that I think. In many ways, I believe paper does the same thing. Now, that talking is why I want to do a podcast as compared to blog posts. And I'll dig into that process a little bit more as we go along. I don't want to leave you the impression that I'm ad-libbing this podcast. I do have a script. If I was ad-libbing, the podcast would in fact be longer than it is now. So in the episode here, we'll talk about why paper is good, talk about where it's lacking, and what, if anything, we can do to get the best of both worlds. The spoiler alert is I love paper, and that surprises a lot of people because I'm very invested in the electronic world. But I love paper. It just may not be for the reasons that you think. When we talk about paper, so let's start with why paper is great. I would say first and foremost is a convenient, readily available capture device. And when I say capture, I mean the attention compass model of capture. Get it out of your skull, get it onto a piece of paper. I think it's great. I don't think we've out invented it. It's never out to lunch. It never has a bad battery. It never updates. It's never on a device where the system needs to update. You don't have to have special tools. It's cheap. It's easy. I don't necessarily buy into the bound journal version of paper. I use copy paper and I fold it in half twice and I stick it in my pocket and I have a pen with me. So I'm prepared to capture things. That's not the only way I capture things, but I am prepared, and paper is great for this. I've tried devices, I've tried expensive devices, I've tried cheap devices, I've tried various things. At the end of the day, a device is always there and you always have to deal with it. If you're carrying an iPad, you got to set it down somewhere while you go pick up your lunch tray. If you drop it, it breaks. You can't put it in your pocket. Now, I will say I have not explored using my mobile phone at great length for this same kind of task. I have done a lot of recording on my mobile, and I think that's great. I was talking about my process earlier. Step one of a podcast is to identify a topic, and step two is for me to drive to a meeting that's an hour away, and the whole time I'm talking to my mobile about that topic. And so I've just played with mobile a little bit. I'm not against mobile. There is some still psychological barrier when you pull out your phone in the middle of a conversation with somebody. And that's another advantage of paper. Paper really doesn't have that, or certainly not anywhere near the same degree. You pull out a piece of paper and a pencil and start taking notes, and people think, wow, he thought what I just said was really important. Versus your phone, where there's always in the back of our mind, oh, well, he just got an important text and he's ignoring me while he gets on his phone. So paper's great. It's convenient. It's never out to lunch. It doesn't break. It's robust and easy to deal with. So that's one reason I like paper. Another reason that paper is great goes back to Chris's LinkedIn post. Paper does not, in and of itself, have the ability to distract us. And many people have a computing environment and even a mobile environment where we can get interrupted by it. I said distraction earlier. I, of course, mean interruption. Paper doesn't do things to interrupt us. Paper shows up, sits there, very quiet. We write things on it or we don't, but it has no means to interrupt our thought process. Now, I will say that I don't think there's anything magical about paper that focuses us. And Chris talks about this, I think, a little bit in his post, and his experience is his experience. But I do think that it is a benefit that it's not popping and dinging. One of the things that happens when I try to use my cell phone, my mobile, to capture things is I always have to start up an app and then I have to get the keyboard right and I have to do the thing. And all of that is just a little bit of an interference, and paper doesn't do that. You whip it out, you take your note, you put it away, you're done. So sort of lack of distractions. Now I will say that there's an aspect of this that Chris may have been trying to cover, which is we know well that our brain responds to environmental cues. And the evidence here is much of the sleep therapy practice is around making your bedroom someplace where you sleep. You turn it into, it's not a place where we watch TV. You turn it into, it's not a place where I check my cell phone or my email or whatever's going on. It's a place where we go to sleep. And when we do that, the hypothesis, at least, and I think there's evidence for this, is that our brain then understands why it's in that room and supports going to sleep, this sort of environmental habit that our brain takes on. And it's true that paper could be similar to that, but I'm not sold entirely. And at the end of the day, somebody that is consistently allowing devices to interrupt them, that's going to happen whether they have paper in their hands or whether they have a keyboard and mouse in their hands. So I'm kind of both ways on this. If it's something that speaks to your brain and it's an environmental cue, I think that's another great reason to use paper. But just recognize that if you're still getting interruptions while you're using paper, it's not the paper's fault. Personally, I think the most powerful thing about paper is this realization thing that we talked about a minute ago. Anytime we realize we put something in the world, we make it real, there are constraints that force us to clarify our thought, to clarify our idea. At a minimum, a minor constraint is we have to use language. We have to use a symbol set, the Latin alphabet when we write. Do we have to? No. Do 98.6% of us use this? Yes. And so it helps our brain, I think, clarify when we put some constraints and structure around that. And I believe that paper does that. Now, from this perspective, there are many things that will perform that same function, because when we get things out into the world, this what I call realization, we always face some set of constraints as compared to thinking about an idea in our skulls. And I think that's immensely useful as a step of realization. And I think writing on paper is a way to realize thoughts. But in this sense, again, there's nothing magical about paper. Anything out in the world will do, in my thinking and in my experience. Whiteboards, recordings, paper, all of these different things can provide that constraint where we really sharpen our focus. And there are pure thought tools that will allow you to do this. For example, people that are in memory competitions have what they refer to as a mind palace. And I've just explored that just the tiniest little bit. I'm certainly no expert, but that always felt really heavyweight to me. And that would probably provide some constraints and help us think about things. And I'm sure that there are others that I'm just not familiar with, but I am familiar with that. So my point going forward is I'm going to use the word paper a lot, but paper here just means many media. And it generally refers to this realization effect. A third thing about paper and other media is it's outside of our skulls. And there's immense benefit in not storing ideas and thoughts in our skull. If you heard this podcast very much at all, you know I talk about interruption, multitasking, and distraction. And distraction comes from our tendency to try and store things in our skulls. So paper is outside. And so it's a great first step in beginning to clear out our brains and thus reduce distraction. That allows us to focus. And when we're focused on our knowledge work is when we're the most productive. But that said, I love paper. I use a fair amount of it. I buy it by the 500 sheet copy paper ream, and I usually have a piece with me and a pen tucked in my shirt so that I always know that I can capture. Now, I said earlier that my nitpicky, if you will, argument with Chris is that in my experience, paper doesn't really do anything to protect us from interruption. And I quipped earlier, people that can be just as often interrupted with a piece of paper in their hands as they can with a keyboard and mouse in their hands. Now, is that a little bit of an overstatement? Yes, it probably is, because when you're looking at your computer screen, if you're like most computer users, you have multiple windows open and multiple things going on. Your computer dings and pings at you. And so all these things are available to call to your attention and claim your attention. And so if you're not looking at a computer screen, I would say there is some advantage in terms of avoiding interruption. But I'm not sure that paper in and of itself does that. I think if we get away from our screens and that set of interruptions, I think we think better. But I also think there are multiple ways to do that that involve your computer. And I'll make this point towards the end of our talk today. I think most people don't discipline their computers. And we'll talk about what that is and how it works. But I think both paper and digital don't have any magical properties in terms of focusing us. Now, that said, electronic digital has huge advantages over other kinds of media. So again, paper is very flexible, right? Diagrams, words, pictures, you can put anything you can imagine on a piece of paper, little sketches, right? I'm not a big fan of doodling, but I'm also not a big fan of fidget spinners or whatever's going on in that front now. And so it's very flexible in a way that modern, I'll say, desktop applications are really not. But I would say, when we talk about the advantages of electronic, I will say that you're almost definitely a faster typist than you are a handwriter. And this was a surprise to me, so I had to test it. My daughter is a big user of mobile, as expected. And she claims that she's every bit as fast a typist on her mobile with the two thumb method as I am with 10 fingers on a keyboard. And I'm like, there ain't no way. And so I actually did an experiment, and she was right there with me. Now, I'm no speed typist, right? You wouldn't be impressed with my typing speed, but I have trained myself. I have taken the exercises, and I don't have to look at the keyboard when I type, and I trundle along at about 60 words a minute. And she matched me on her double thumb keyboard on her iPhone. And I was shocked. So, a little moment of self-disclosure here. I had to, so I promised her I would publicly apologize for my relative dismissal of the two thumb typing method. In my defense, she did have slightly more errors than I did. So the point is that you're probably much faster in realizing your idea with a keyboard under your hands than you are with handwriting. And if you're not, it's easy, relatively easy, to become a faster typist. I'm not sure of many methods that allow us to become a faster handwriter, although I am familiar with the, I think now, lost art of shorthand. My mom did it for years and years. So I think we're faster on the computer, and I think that's important. An interesting point of any realization of our thought is we realize it out there in the world, and then what do we do with it? Now, obviously, I think, but I'll say it anyway, when I talk about realizing it, I think that a Word document, electronic document, is every bit as good on the realization front as paper. And so here we're talking about why electronic then is a little bit better. So we talked about while paper is very flexible, you're probably faster just on straight up words with a keyboard in your hands. And if not, then you can improve your keyboarding. But anytime you do that, there's this question of what do I do with it? Now, I will say in the modern world, of course, every idea is going to have to be digital at some point in its life. At some point, it's going to be in an email, in a document sent to the printer, in a PowerPoint presentation, in a spreadsheet, delivered to somebody else. Somehow it's going to get into electronic land. So there is, naturally there's some benefit to starting there and not having to transcribe or electronically capture something that is basically an analog realization of your idea. Is this huge? Not in and of itself, but I do think it's worth noting. That is, I think it's worth noting that everything at some point in its life cycle will almost definitely need to be digital, particularly if it's valuable. And so then we might as well start in the electronic world? I think in many cases we probably should, because if you use audio recordings like I do, there is a transcription step that is needed to turn it into any sort of usable, in my world, usable electronic media. I don't think audio files are a great way to do very much anything, and particularly in my use case. I do think that recording something and sending it to somebody does have some value. And then, kind of the other piece here is the notion of digital paper. So e-ink apps and Apple Pencil and all those sorts of things. I don't think that digital paper in and of itself has huge advantages over real actual physical paper. Now, it's already captured, it's already electronified, that's fine. That's a step, and that's just what I was arguing a minute ago. But I mean, in terms of somehow an e-ink page with an Apple Pencil being in and of itself better than what you would produce with a physical piece of paper and a physical pen, I just don't see a whole lot of benefit there. I don't see a whole lot of cost either, except that you do have to learn how to deal with the device and the interface versus everybody knows how to deal with a pencil. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there, but I just want to say that I don't think digital paper at this point is a huge advantage over physical paper. So here we are. We've got, I'm going to say analog, physical, and I'm going to say digital. And I would suggest that, and I alluded to this just a few seconds ago, the fundamental challenge of analog is to bring it into the system. Now, people say, well, I don't have to bring it into the system. I would argue that you're much better off bringing it into the system for the following reason. Our ability to organize, to store, to portability, to have it with us is so much greater in the electronic world than it is in any physical world. I see people carrying bound journals of blank pages and they treat them just like they treat an iPad. Don't want to drop it. If it gets coffee on it, it's bad. So the point here is that properly utilized, our electronic equipment our digital stuff is so much easier to deal with and to store and to search and to find it later and to carry with us. Now, when I say that, I will say that I've never found a single piece of software or device that has the flexibility that's built into paper. The e-ink things are beginning to get there, but again, there's a fair amount of overhead and interruption. Many people, since they think they can easily change pen colors, they do. And some of this is just meaningless overhead in my world. So, when we eventually need to digitalize, right? We eventually need to take our physical media and get it into the computer for reasons of it's going to wind up there at some point in its life cycle anyway. And two is that's probably the best place for it because we can store, organize, transport, all these different things so much more easily than any physical media with paper as paper. It's a simple and almost free act to take a picture of your piece of paper and then it moves over into the digital world. And then we can organize it, store it, all these different ideas. So, I think that's very important that we move it over into the electronic world just because of those advantages. And so what I typically tell people is I love paper, but in order to deal with paper effectively, we've got to use paper. Every piece of paper is like a Kleenex. You use it for what it's good for, and then you chuck it out. When I digitalize, take a picture of a piece of paper, I pretty much immediately throw the paper away because I don't want to collect it around and becoming a nuisance. I don't want to have a different place to go look for ideas, particularly a non-electronic place, a non-digital space. Because in order to find something in a bound journal, you have to flip through it page by page. It's very slow search. So that caveat of using the paper correctly. So we've got analog, we've got digital. How can we bring the two together? Again, I'll go back and echo what Chris said. Anytime we're using our electronic devices, we are probably entering an environment that's full of interruption. I think we can manage that better than we do. And that'll be the next part of our conversation. But it's absolutely true that we are not terribly good at that disciplining of our devices. And we let our devices discipline us rather than the other way around. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So we talked about this whole notion. Paper, in large, paper, whiteboard, audio recording, gives you constraints and disciplines your thoughts as you realize them. And it does not have the capacity to interrupt us. Your computer is an interruption machine, but we can discipline our computers. It's a little work, and it's a little bit of, hey, there's a feature there that I simply don't need to use. But we can do it. Now, I will say one of the fallacies around disciplining our machines is some people think, well, I should work the way the machine wants me to work. And let's deal with that very quickly. The people that designed your computer, the people that designed your operating system, and the people that design your software are not, let's say, 100% on your side when it comes to your productivity. I'm very familiar with the software world. I had a career for 20 years in software. And software is built, yes, to be used, but primarily to be monetized. And this is going back 20 years. So software builders want you to buy their software. Now, part of that sale is, hey, it'll do things for you. It'll make things easier for you. Perhaps it will do things you couldn't do otherwise. And that's great. We all need that in our lives. But most software packages at some point begin to diverge from that train. It's too, the lure of making money is just too severe. And so the computer itself and the operating system and the software are not hyper tuned with your productivity in mind. I would suggest that they're not hyper tuned with human productivity in mind, but that may be a little bit too harsh. But what we do as computer users is we let ourselves be led along in workflow by the devices. And, ooh, we've got an electronic calendar, so we should use an electronic calendar. Great. Well, I have the ability to set alarms 15 minutes before any meeting I have. It's a feature of the system, so it must be good that I use it. No, it's not. That's where we get into this interruption production of the machine. Oh, it's great that I can have multiple windows up at the same time. Well, that promotes multitasking. That promotes interruption. So, is it great? It's useful in many ways, but what are the extended outcomes of that? And what happens here is that most people wind up with devices that are tuned for maximum interruption, and to some degree for a huge amount of distraction. One of the latest and greatest ways to monetize software is as an attention control device. Facebook is the the straw man here. Okay. They've tuned their interface such that you stay in it. And that's been their goal, is to have your attention. Have your attention so they can serve you ads. They serve you ads so they can make money. Okay. Now, Facebook is not alone here. They just happen to be my favorite whipping boy. Okay. Many software packages are doing this. And it's even gotten to the point where when I subscribe to services on the web and I'm paying for them monthly, they serve me up ads. Now, is that some huge interruption in my world? No, but it is there. And I don't think it's going to get any less intrusive as time goes by. The point of this is that our computers are not designed, set up, created so as to exclusively so as to help us with our productivity. So that just means that we've got to roll up our sleeves and we've got to get in there and we've got to tune the way the machine works so that it doesn't become this interruption factory. It's very doable. And we talk about it a lot when we do attention compass implementation. We talk about, okay, well, set your computer up this way. If your computer dings at you, make it stop. There's a better way. And we teach you that better way. So I would say, hey, if there's one takeaway from this, if your desktop computer dings and pings at you, if it tells you every time you got an email, a new email, turn that off. It's not exciting to get a new email anymore. And most of us don't need the additional draw towards our email. So operating systems, software, they're really not, they don't have a good reason to discipline your devices for you. And they've got plenty of good reasons to not. So again, apps are serving up ads. Why my desktop Zoom client needs to show me an ad every third time I open it, I have no idea. And again, is it some big deal? No, but it's an irritation. It's like, what are you people doing? So your software team is not doing it, and your operating system team is not doing it, and your hardware design team is not doing it. And the trend is totally in the wrong direction. And when I say doing it, I mean supporting your productivity, supporting your lack of interruption. If anything, it's going the other direction. And here's a little thought exercise here. And we're not far from this. And I don't want to be the future's going to heck in a handbasket. But my car, and I don't have a brand new car, I can only imagine, but my car seems to want to change what it does in the electronics world. So how you use the phone feature in my car is from 2014, because that's how old my car is. Love my car. But trying to use the phone in my car is an exercise in frustration. It takes me probably 2 full minutes to execute a phone call just by talking to my car. Now, if I talk to my phone, it'll happen in 10 seconds. But if I talk to my car, I got to go through this menu of voice commands, and it's giving me all the options all the time, blah, blah, blah. So, this thought experiment, and I think this could be happening. Imagine if your car got a software update every night. I mean, what are we talking about, right? We've got the panel in modern cars that control the radio and the air conditioner, right? So, oh, hey, this is a better order. You don't see the radio first, you see the air conditioner. Well, we got to learn to use it all over again. I was joking. It's like, at some point they're going to put the pedals, the gas and brake pedals on a piece of software, and then they're going to switch them sometime because they think it'll help us. Well, just imagine yourself in that scenario. I don't think it's going to happen, but just right. I mean, I'm illustrating absurdity by being absurd, uh, which just dated me. So the trend is not that computers are trying to help you be more disciplined in their use. They're trying to help you be less. Even back to the original Windows Office apps, right? Hey, there's a new feature here. I have no reason to believe that you need it, but here it is. Okay, fine. And now many messages can't even be skipped. You have to, it's like the commercials on TV that say, hey, push a button to choose your ad, and a little timer clock, and the timer clock runs down and you get the ad they choose for you. So you might as well go ahead and push a button and pick one and save yourself 15 seconds of, watching the screen. Anyway, very, very often apps are moving in this direction. So to kind of get back out into, okay, Larry, what's the point? Well, the point is to discipline your computing environment. It's just like if you hire a brand new virtual assistant and they come in from somebody else's workflow and they have used most of your tool set, but not all of it. And you have to bring them on board and show them how you do things. If they answer email for you on your behalf, then you got to teach them how to do that. So this is a natural thing that humans do. We have just decided that we probably shouldn't need to do it in the computing world. And I'm here to tell you that we do. So this, again, this is a big part of what we talk about in Attention Compass. And I don't tell you how to do things much, but I do tell you, hey, this needs to be a goal. Okay. You need to get your computer to stop dinging at you. You need to get away from a world where there's 6 partial screens visible. You need to get away from a world where your email window is always up and you get interrupted every time a new email comes in because something changes on the screen. So there are ways to work on this. I'll have some tips for you in the Attention Compass implementation. An example of this, one, I think, shining example of something that will help us discipline our computer and avoid many interruptions is Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm a Windows guy, I'm not a Mac guy. It's not a religious thing, it's just my habit. Okay. But in more recent versions of Windows, they've developed the virtual desktop. And this is a software idea that's been around for a while. It's kind of hard to implement, but Windows built it in. And so what you can do is you can actually have multiple desktops and switch between them. Well, great, Larry, what am I doing? Getting new wallpaper? No. An opened app window is sticky to the virtual desktop that you put it on. So I use this feature and I have 5 different desktops. And one desktop is a workspace. It doesn't have anything on it except, of course, Evernote. Another screen is for business emails and communications. And it has both of my business email windows up, and it has other communication that I might need to do there on one virtual desktop. And it goes on to personal communications. And I have one that's oriented around a particular client that uses up a fair amount of my time, and their chat and tools are there. But I think I have 5. I have one for gaming. So there you are. And the ease of switching between these virtual desktops, because it's a hotkey stroke, makes it very useful. So for example, I've got a work block, so I'm on my work desktop. And it's time to take a break, whatever that is, I'm still working. And so in about 2 seconds, I can flip over to my communications desktop and check and see very quickly what's going on. Is somebody communicated with me something I need to know? Anything here urgent? And then I can flip back off of it very quickly. And I think if you explore that, you Windows users out there, I presume iOS has a similar feature. I think you'll learn that it is a very useful way to discipline your computer and make it work in ways that are less of an interruption in your work. So think about that. And I think that builds out into kind of a bigger idea. And this bigger idea is to decide how you're going to work and then do what it takes to get the device to support that. Now, there is a balance here, like there is in anything else. We have to be very careful about the search for the perfect app. And I see this a lot because there's 143 different productivity tools out there. And I seldom give a talk without somebody popping up and going, well, you use Evernote, how's that compared to toolset X? Well, many times I don't know because it's impossible to keep up with all of those things and what they're doing. I'm a little bit familiar with some of them, and I continually look for the feature set in another tool that will support Attention Compass, because that's all Evernote is in my world. It's a platform for Attention Compass. So the big takeaway is decide how you're going to work and then discipline the device to support that workflow. Don't let it do a whole bunch of extraneous things that you don't really need. Don't be too quick to adopt new features and face that learning curve because it's steep. So take the time and learn the things that you need to learn in order to make your computing environment disciplined to your work style. Now, there's a balance here, as there are in many things. Don't hear me say that you should be chasing the next new thing. Okay. I don't believe that. I run into this all the time. There are all these different tools out there that are basically task management or list management tools. And people go, well, why do you have Evernote versus brand X? And it's because the real reason is because I know for a fact that Evernote will still support the things that Attention Compass needs to do. Evernote is simply a platform that we build our individual Attention Compass implementation on top of. And it's the platform that I'm choosing right now because it has feature set and implementations of features that support the way Attention Compass works. And I've done that research for you. I cannot keep up with all of the different flavors that are out there. And there's a small possibility that somebody's doing it as well as Evernote, i.e., doing the things that Attention Compass needs done. But it's going to take me a little while to figure that out. So sometimes a good enough tool is a good enough tool. And make no mistake, Attention Compass is not just here's how you use Evernote. Attention Compass is here's a structure in how your workflow needs to progress so that you have this calm productivity. It has a lot to do with research on personal information management. It has a lot to do with my experience in helping people manage knowledge workflows. But it's all built on top of the foundation of Evernote. And it could be ported. I've tried that once or twice with mixed results. And I'm always on the lookout for apps and things that could perhaps give me additional features. But, and this is important, that's my job. That's part of what you all come to me for is, hey, is there a better platform for Attention Compass? And I say, I haven't found it yet. So just to say, I talk a lot about Evernote, but it is simply that. It's simply a scaffold. And I don't want you to hear when we're disciplining our computer, I don't want you to hear me say that you need to go in search of the next new app because it's expensive, frustrating, and time consuming. And you've got other things you need to do. You've got other ways to create value in the world. You need to be focused on those. And it's so easy and so tempting. There's even the phrase out there floating around, forgive me, productivity porn. And we spend so much time trying to think about our productivity that we don't ever actually get anything done. Well, I offer to you the fact that I've already done a lot of that. And so you don't have to. And all that culminates in the attention compass. So please don't hear me say when I say discipline your computer and explore how it works, please, you probably are not in the business of engineering computers, but I will say, turn some things off. Go easy on feature set. There is software out there. Well, I'll just use Excel as an example. It's been in development now for 40 years or something like that. And their number one category of feature requests is things that Excel already does. And they're out there building new gee whiz features into Excel that 99% of users simply don't need, will never use, but it's cool. Now, at the same time, if we switch over to Microsoft Word, okay, they still have not developed a way to print an outline. It's a little bit of a kludge that we exploit to have Word print. We go and we create an outline and we use the Word tools to give us headings and all these different sorts of things. We can create a table of contents, but there is no direct engineered function for printing just the outline of a document. It's like, what have you guys been doing for 30 years? That's such an obvious need for a use case. And we've all learned this workaround, which is not terrible. But the point is, they haven't decided to build that feature yet, at least not that I'm aware of. And therefore, it's this other thing. Well, they're out building all kind of gee whiz features, a lot of it having to do with AI. Well, maybe I want AI, maybe I don't, but they're building it because it's sexy and it gets eyeballs and helps them sell their software. So that's just a little bit of an aside, an example of what the actual software thing is doing. Point is, don't go on a new software hunt, don't go on a feature hunt. Most of what most people need to be doing is turning features off, not hunting for new ones to turn on. So discipline your computing environment. Okay. It's not hard. And you just need to have targets for what this discipline needs to look like. And that's what I'm trying to do here is help you with that. So step one is fix it so you don't need your computer to ding at you. Fix your workflow if you have to, right? Such that your computer is not interrupting you. You've got better work to do and you need your focus to do your best work. So just to wrap this up, I'll say, once you've disciplined your computing environment, and I mean the desktop, I mean the mobile, I mean whatever devices you've got, once you've disciplined them properly, then I think the idea of paper becomes easier to build into the computing environment. I don't think paper will ever go away. But if its primary use is as a distraction-free device, then we can emulate that in our computing environment. And then we just go straight to digitized electronic documents rather than having to take the step of turning the paper into digital or turning the audio into digital. Not that these things are huge overhead, just that why bother if you don't have to? And then, regardless, my computer, as you might imagine, is pretty well disciplined. And I keep looking for ways to discipline my computer so it doesn't interrupt me. And I keep on the lookout for interruption producing new features so that I can turn them off. And all of that continues to go on. But I can guarantee you with almost certainty that the next time you see me, I'll have a pen in my shirt and a piece of paper in my pocket. So the takeaways. Okay. Paper's great. Paper has no magic when it comes to interruption proofing you. You're either moving to a different environment or you're looking at the paper instead of your desktop environment, which is, because you haven't disciplined it, full of interruption. Paper has its place and has its advantages, but it's not a panacea. So don't think that using paper is somehow going to solve your interruption problem. And we all have an interruption problem. Don't think that paper is the panacea. You still need to do the work on your computing environment. And the benefit of disciplining your computer environment is twofold. One is it stops interrupting you. It stops being a problem and starts being a solution. And two is we can automatically and in digital ways realize our thoughts. We can automatically and in digital ways capture our thoughts, which has all the advantages of electronic without, if you disciplined your computer, without the challenges of the electronic world. I'll leave it there for now. This is Larry Tribble, Ph.D. Thanks for taking some time to improve your task and information management on the Do Busy Right podcast. The show is dedicated to helping you think about how to get better at working. And we do this by improving your attention and your focus. I believe that your work is not just about your job, but about all the tasks that you do to turn yourself, your environment, and your relationships into what you want them to be. What we're really talking about here is the underpinnings of becoming who you want to be. The primary way I help people is through coaching the Attention Compass process. Attention Compass is 4 workflows and a tool set that support our information, task, and attention management. I help people with big goals to build habits that put them in a position to achieve. We do this by eliminating wasted time and wasted attention. If you'd like to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to dobusyright.com for more information. Have a good week, more effective and less exhausted. Do Busy Right.